Imagine you are the authority in the empire. The church, textbooks, museums, everything speaks your version. And suddenly, in the main cemetery of the country, you see something strange. There are almost no orthodox crosses. Instead, on the graves of the elite, another language recurs: Ouroboros, fasces, owls, winged skulls, clocks. These are not decorations. This is evidence. The elite lived by a different code, and orthodoxy for the people could simply be a facade. If the sacredness of the throne is a facade, then power has always been about control, not faith. One of your orders, and everything will be called an allegory, the fashion of the epoch, enlightenment, so that the question dies. What will you choose? To acknowledge that the elite buried their own not in our way, or to make the country believe that the eyes are deceiving? And now let's look at which symbols are repeated there, and what they actually mean. Enter any old cemetery in St. Petersburg. Stop at the very first tombstone. Observe its dimensions. The obelisk rises to 4 meters. The thickness of the column exceeds the girth of 2 men. The sarcophagus is hewn from a solid block of marble, weighing nearly a ton. This is not a monument. This is an architectural structure, seemingly created for purposes other than merely marking a burial site. Proceed further along the alleys of the Lazarevsko Cemetery, the oldest in the city. There are no modest slabs here, familiar to our eyes. Here stand truncated pyramids, shortened columns, massive steles. Each tombstone demanded the efforts of dozens of workers, months of labor, and fabulous funds. Why such excess? Whom were they burying under multi-ton blocks of stone? Move to the Tikvin Cemetery, established in 1823. The same picture, but on an even larger scale. Rows of columns, like the ruins of an ancient temple. Obelisks reaching for the sky. Sarcophagi that could serve as the foundation for an entire building. The scale impresses not with beauty, but with disproportion. These structures are too vast for an ordinary person. They are designed as if their creators understood the afterlife differently, or belonged to beings larger than us. But the strangeness is not in the size. The strangeness is in what is not here. The Russian Empire of the 19th century positioned itself as a stronghold of orthodoxy. The church controlled all aspects of life, including funeral rites. The Lazarevskoye Cemetery is located on the grounds of the Alexander Nevsky Lavra, the main Orthodox shrine of the city. Here rest princes, ministers, generals, merchants, architects, the elite of the state. And where are the Orthodox 8-pointed crosses? They are almost absent. Instead, skulls adorned with butterflies, snakes biting their own tails, hourglasses with wings, owls with empty eye sockets. Roman fasces are displayed on the tombstones. Pagan symbolism has flooded the Christian cemetery at the main monastery of the country. These are not isolated graves of free thinkers or heretics. This is a system that has spread throughout the entire necropolis. Infants are buried under the same symbols as generals. Merchants are laid to rest under truncated columns, just like princes. Ordinary townspeople rest under pyramids without tops, just as state figures do. If these are Masonic signs, how can one explain their presence on the graves of children? One does not become a Mason at 2 years of age. If this is a secret society, why is its symbolism displayed openly in the central cemetery of the empire? Logic collapses. There remains only one explanation. This is not Masonic symbolism. These are traces of a system that existed here before orthodoxy, before the Romanovs, before the history that textbooks tell us. To understand what these stones are saying, one must learn to read their language. Take the butterfly on the skull. The official version calls it a symbol of the eternal soul, flying out of mortal flesh. But look more closely. This is not a Christian metaphor. This is a pagan cycle of rebirth, broken into 3 stages. At first, the caterpillar crawls on the ground. It is tied to the material, unable to detach itself from the surface. Then it is placed in a cocoon, a sarcophagus, where transformation occurs. The caterpillar does not simply fall asleep. It breaks down into primary elements in order to be reborn in a new form. And finally, a butterfly emerges from the cocoon. It does not remember its past life as a caterpillar, but continues the same cycle. It will lay eggs, from which new caterpillars will hatch. The circle is closed. This is not a story about the ascension of the soul to God. It is a tale of infinite repetition, about cycles of life, tragedy, and rebirth that have no end. About time that flows not as a straight line from the creation of the world to the day of judgment, but moves in a circle, returning to the starting point. Look at the Ouroboros, a snake biting its own tail. It consumes itself to be reborn from itself. There is no beginning, no end. Eternal movement in a circle, a symbol of cosmic cycles. Worlds are born, perish in catastrophes, are reborn from the ruins. Hourglass with wings. Time flips over. Sand sifts through. Someone invisible turns the vessel. The process begins anew. The wings indicate the mechanism is controlled by forces beyond the earthly. A scythe that completes the cycle. Not an instrument of punishment, but a tool for harvest. When the ear is ripe, it is cut to sow new seeds. The tragedy of one world becomes the foundation for the next. Everything that has perished will serve as fertilizer for future shoots. An owl on the top of a tombstone. Some will call it a symbol of wisdom, but pay attention to the empty eye sockets, the predatory beak, the claws in the stone. This is the guardian of the world of the dead, a bird that sees in the dark. It watches over the boundary between worlds. Time is cyclical. Rebirth is guaranteed. There is no eternal paradise or hell. There is an infinite wheel that turns independently of desires. This is not Christian eschatology. This is a pagan, possibly Vedic understanding of the cosmos. The traces of this system can be seen not only in symbolism, but also in the very matter of stone. Where did they get the marble for the sarcophagi? The nearest deposits of white marble are located in Karelia, hundreds of kilometers away. Delivering multi-ton blocks by water required special barges, loading systems, and lifting mechanisms. All of this should have left traces in documents, in port records, and in merchants' accounts. There are no traces. It is as if the sarcophagi appeared out of nowhere, perhaps because they were not brought from afar. They were found here, on site. They were extracted from the ground when digging new graves, cleaned, and reused. This explains the unprocessed inner surfaces and the strange uniformity of the material, which does not correspond to known deposits in Karelia. Look at the sculptures of the deceased lying on the sarcophagi. They are not praying. They are not standing before God. They are reclining as if resting after lunch. One hand supports the head. The other hangs off the edge of the slab. A pose of rest, not of repentance. This is a Roman tradition. In ancient Rome, the dead were depicted lying on a triclinium. It was believed that the deceased continued to feast with their ancestors in the afterlife. There was no Christian notion of the trials of the soul or judgment after death. Here is Captain Ion Christian von Resk of the Semenov Regiment. He lies on his side, propped up on his elbow. Above him is a coat of arms, 2 six-pointed stars, a Maltese cross, a crescent moon, dates in Roman numerals, no hint of orthodoxy. Almost every old grave has dates in Roman numerals. On the monument of the mathematician Euler, Academia Petropolitana, 1787. Latin in a Russian cemetery by an Orthodox monastery. Reliefs show people in Roman togas, sacrifices before altars, processions with torches, scenes impossible for the Christian tradition. A direct continuation of the Roman burial cult in the Orthodox state. The Romanov dynasty came to power in the 17th century. Russia declared itself the new Rome, the third Rome after Constantinople. The double-headed eagle of Byzantium became the state emblem. Roman law and architecture were implemented as models. However, possibly, this was not cultural continuity, but the appropriation of the heritage of a completely different civilization, whose ruins the Romanovs encountered in these territories. Chopped columns, pyramids without peaks, trees with cut branches. These forms are repeated throughout the cemetery, from Lazarevsky to Tikvinsky. The official version calls them Masonic symbols of interrupted life. A column that was not finished, a pyramid that had its peak cut off, a tree of life whose branches were chopped before they could bear fruit. But if this is Masonic symbolism, why is it on the graves of infants? Freemasons did not admit children to their lodges. Why are these signs on the tombstones of merchants who likely had no connection to secret societies? Why do broken columns stand on the graves of ordinary townspeople who had neither wealth nor connections to be initiated into esoteric teachings? There is another explanation. It is not a symbol of a person's departure. It is a symbol of a lost civilization. The broken column signifies a destroyed temple. The pyramid without a peak indicates an unfinished or destroyed structure of power. The tree with severed branches speaks of a disrupted family tree, of a civilization whose history was violently interrupted. Those who erected these monuments lived among the ruins. They saw giant buildings with proportions that did not fit human height. They found structures that they could not explain with the technologies of their time. They walked through the buried ground floors, not understanding what catastrophe had buried them. And they captured it in stone. The truncated column on the grave said, "We live on the ruins of something great. We are not builders. We are settlers who have occupied foreign territories after the previous owners disappeared." Columns in cemeteries are not just decorative elements. They are a memory of the colonnades of the buildings among which people lived in the 19th century. Buildings with ceilings 12 meters high, with doors 5 meters tall, with windows starting at the level of the third floor of a modern house. Structures designed not for people with a height of 160 to 170 centimeters. Pyramids on tombstones refer to megalithic structures found around the world. Obelisks, temples, stone platforms, whose purpose no one could explain. They were declared ancient religious buildings, but their functionality remained a mystery. Perhaps those who placed pyramids on graves knew more than what we were later told. A family tree with broken branches indicates interrupted succession. It is not just the death of a person, but the disappearance of an entire line of knowledge transfer. When the last bearer of tradition dies, the family tree is severed. The new branches will no longer be a continuation of the old trunk. They will grow from a different root. Look at the sarcophagi more closely. There are two types. The first ones are made of stone slabs, bonded with mortar. They were made on site, fitting the blocks to each other. The second type is carved from a solid piece of marble. Monolithic structures weighing hundreds of kilograms, and sometimes more than a ton. Some sarcophagi have lost their side walls. Now it is possible to look inside. And here is what is striking. The inner surfaces are unrefined. They are rough, coarse, with visible traces of the tool that dug into the stone. The outer side is polished to a mirror shine, but inside, it's as if the work was left half finished. Why polish a surface that no one will see? If the sarcophagus is intended for burial, the interior walls should be smooth. The body of the deceased should not come into contact with rough stone. But here, everything is the opposite. The facade is flawless. The interior is careless. The exact same picture under the monument to Minin and Pozharsky on Red Square. The pedestal, on which the bronze figures stand, is a granite sarcophagus. When it was examined, it was found that inside it is hollow and the walls are unprocessed. As if this block was not specially made for the monument. It was found and adapted. Solid marble sarcophagi raise even more questions. To carve the inner cavity in the monolith, tools capable of cutting stone with high precision are needed. In the 19th century, such technologies existed, but they left characteristic marks: saw grooves, chisel chips, unevenness from manual work. There are no traces here. The surfaces are smooth, as if the stone was not cut, but cast. As if the marble was soft when it was shaped, and then hardened. Such technology existed in civilizations that built megaliths around the world. In Egypt, in Peru, in Baalbek, blocks with the same signs are found. They were not hewn, They were molded. It is possible that the sarcophagi in cemeteries are not a product of the 19th century. They are remnants of a previous production system. They were found, cleaned of deposits, polished on the outside, and used as tombstones. The new inhabitants of the area simply adapted what they found in the ground. This explains the mass production of such sarcophagi. There are too many for manual production. To produce hundreds of solid marble blocks would require decades of work by entire teams of stone cutters. But cemeteries were established quickly, within a few years. Where did the ready-made sarcophagi come from in such quantity? They were not made. They were excavated from the ground. Where graves were dug, they stumbled upon old burials, or what was considered burials. Sarcophagi were retrieved, cleaned, and placed on new graves. No one wondered about who created them. What mattered was that they existed and fit the size. Now look at one specific gravestone. Alexei Fyodorovich Turchaninov, the owner of mountain factories in the Urals. He passed away in 1787 at the age of 83. 83 years at the end of the 18th century. This destroys the myth that people in the past rarely lived to be 40. The elite lived long, because they had access to knowledge that was not available to ordinary people. Turchaninov owned factories in the Ural region, a territory where traces of old technologies were preserved. Metallurgy, chemistry, possibly medicine. All of this was part of a legacy that was gradually being lost, but was still used by those who had resources. The tombstone of Turchaninov was created by the sculptor Martos, the same one who sculpted the monument to Minin and Pozharsky. The composition is impressive. The bronze figure of a woman in an ancient chiton symbolizes virtue. Next to her is an old man with wings on his back. This is Kronos, the ancient Greek embodiment of time. At his feet lies a skull. Kronos points with his finger to a stone tablet where the date and name of the deceased are engraved. The entire composition is set on a massive sarcophagus, a granite block with ideal polishing, exactly the same in shape and size as the pedestal for Minin and Pozharsky in Red Square. But the main thing is not this. The main thing is the bas-reliefs. 4 gilded bas-reliefs were installed on the side panels of the sarcophagus. They were removed, officially for restoration and preservation. They are currently housed in the State Museum of Urban Sculpture, where access to them is restricted, but photographs have been preserved. The first bas-relief, scene of a sacrifice. In the center is a truncated column on which flames are burning. People in Roman togas stand around, reaching their hands towards the fire. This is not a Christian rite. This is an ancient ritual of incense, when the smoke from the sacrifice rises to the heavens, carrying a message to the gods. The column here is not a decorative element. It is functional, the altar where the ritual is performed. This explains why columns are so often found in cemeteries. They do not just symbolize ruined buildings. They remind of real structures that were used for rituals, perhaps energy practices that modern science does not recognize, but which were part of the knowledge of a lost civilization. The second bas-relief, a funeral procession. People in togas carry a stretcher with the body of the deceased. Around them are torches, musicians with flutes, and mourners with their hair down. A Roman funeral rite in pure form. No cross, no icons, no Orthodox priests. Only the ancient tradition. 2 other bas-reliefs have disappeared. Wikipedia shows photos of only 2. The others were either not digitized or are being deliberately concealed. Perhaps they depict something so explicit that the demonstration of these scenes would undermine the official version of history. Why take the gilded bas-reliefs from the grave and hide them in the museum's storeroom? Restoration is a weak excuse. The bronze figures of Kronos and Virtue remained in place. They were not touched. Only those images were removed that directly indicated the religious affiliation of the buried. Turchaninov was part of the elite of the Russian Empire. He owned factories, opposed Pugachev's uprising, and received nobility for his services to the crown. And he was buried not as an Orthodox Christian, but as a Roman patrician. With rituals that came from another culture, from another system of beliefs. The bas-reliefs proved this too obviously. Therefore, they were removed. They left a composition that can be interpreted as an allegory. Chronos, time; virtue, the moral qualities of the deceased; the skull, the transience of being. Everything can be explained within the framework of universal symbols, without delving into the religious context. But the bas-reliefs destroyed this safe interpretation. They showed a specific ritual, a specific tradition, a specific religion. And this religion had nothing to do with orthodoxy. Now raise your head and look at the Trinity Cathedral of the Alexander Nevsky Lavra, the main church of the complex, the spiritual center of the city. A pyramid is carved on the portico above the entrance. In the center of the pyramid is an inscription, God. Around the inscription, rays radiate in all directions. The all-seeing eye, one of the most recognizable symbols, which today is associated with Freemasonry. For Petersburg, this has become a familiar sight. Pyramids and all-seeing eyes adorn the facades of many buildings, including Orthodox churches. The official version explains this as the influence of European architecture, borrowing of classical motifs, and cultural exchange. But step inside the cathedral and look at the bas-relief under the portico. Scene of sacrifice. The central element is an altar with a blazing fire. Around the altar stand figures in long robes and tall headdresses. They are not Orthodox mitres. The shape, ornament, proportions, everything indicates a different tradition. Possibly Old Testament, perhaps even more ancient. Figures reach out their hands to the fire. Smoke rises to the heavens. This is a ritual of incense, identical to that depicted on the relief by Turchaninov. Whom do they sacrifice? Definitely not Jesus Christ. In Christianity, sacrifices have been abolished. Christ brought the final sacrifice, redeeming the sins of humanity. After that, the fire on the altars was supposed to go out. But on the bas-relief of the main Orthodox church of the city, fire burns, and people perform a ritual that Christianity rejected 1500 years ago. Why does this scene adorn the portico of the Trinity Cathedral? Above the entrance, two angels hold the order of Alexander Nevsky. On the star of the order, there is an inscription, for labor and the fatherland. Inside the temple, there is a silver reliquary with the relics of Alexander Nevsky, transferred here from the Hermitage. What is inside the reliquary? The relics of the saint, or something else that needed to be preserved in a place protected by church authority? Temples were not built as new buildings. They are adapted structures of a previous civilization. The all-seeing eye, pyramids, altars with fire. This is the original symbolism of the buildings, which has been masked with Christian overlays. The Lavra was originally an energy node of the old system, a place where power lines converged, where rituals were performed, which modern science calls superstitions, but which were part of an advanced technology. The new owners of the territory reimagined this place as a religious center. They installed Orthodox icons, held a consecration, and declared it a sanctuary. But the original symbolism remained, because the building resisted alteration. Its architecture, its proportions, its orientation to the cardinal directions, all of this was established from the beginning and could not be changed without destroying the very structure. Now walk through the Alexander Nevsky Lavra to the other side. There is a communist cemetery established in the 20th century. The Soviet power destroyed churches, shot priests, declared religion the opium of the people. It was expected that the new ideology would bring new symbols. The hammer and sickle, stars, banners. Walk through the avenues of the communist necropolis. Shortened columns, obelisks, pyramids, flower pots, sarcophagi, ziggurats, mausoleums. The same architectural system as in the royal cemeteries of the 18th and 19th centuries. Ordinary gravestones can be found, but they are more of an exception than a rule. Communists, who destroyed temples and fought against religion, buried their own according to the same system as the royal elite. Thus, it is neither Freemasonry, nor orthodoxy, nor communism. The system is deeper than any ideology. It has survived dynasties, revolutions, and changes of regime. The architectural code is so deeply rooted in culture that even a radical change of power could not alter it. This is the memory of the true builders, of those who created all these forms originally. Columns, pyramids, obelisks are not an invention of Freemasons or communists. This is the legacy of a civilization that existed here before the Romanovs, before the Rurikids, before the history that was recorded in textbooks. Let us return to the necropolis of the Masters of Arts. Here lies Nikolai Mikhailovich Karamzin, the creator of the official history of the Russian state. A man who wrote the version of the past that we study in schools. His work became the foundation for all subsequent textbooks. The dynasty of the Rurikids, the Tatar-Mongol yoke, the rise of Moscow, the unification of Russian lands. This entire narrative was created by Karamzin. The grave of Karamzin is located next to the burials of Dostoevsky and Zhukovsky, next to writers, not historians. This is a subtle hint. Karamzin was not a scholar, not an archive researcher, not an archaeologist. He was a literator who composed a beautiful history based on the sources available to him. And this history was declared the truth. On Karamzin's grave stands a Catholic cross, without a crucifix. In the center of the cross is carved the all-seeing eye, a symbol of those who see the hidden, who possess secret knowledge. Karamzin passed away in 1826. Next to him is buried his wife 4 years later. Her cross does not have the eye, but the epitaph is the same in Church Slavonic. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Church Slavonic in the first third of the 19th century. A language that by that time had already fallen out of everyday use and was only used in services. Why write an epitaph in an archaic language when modern Russian could be used? Perhaps to create the illusion of antiquity, to connect Karamzin with a tradition that supposedly stretches back into the depths of centuries, so that his version of history appears not as an invention of one person, but as a continuation of the chronicled tradition. The all-seeing eye on the grave of the main historian of Russia, a symbol that says, I saw what is hidden from others. I knew the true history, but I recorded not it. I recorded what was needed by the authorities, what created the legitimacy of the new dynasty, what explained why the Romanovs have the right to rule the territories they control. Karamzin is buried under the symbol of secret knowledge. This is a confession for those who can read symbols, for those who understand that history is written not for the pursuit of truth, but for its concealment. Next to Karamzin lies Mikhail Ivanovich Glinka, the composer who is called the father of Russian classical music, the author of the opera Ivan Susanin, also known as Life for the Tsar, a man who celebrated the greatness of Russia through music. A quote from his own work is engraved on his tombstone, "Glory, glory, holy Rus." And on that same gravestone, there is a six-pointed star, the Star of David, as it is commonly referred to. Nearby is a Celtic cross, a harp, which tour guides hurriedly call just a musical instrument, although its shape resembles a menorah. The entire composition is made as if symbols from different traditions were specially collected to confuse the descendants. Nearby is buried the sister of the composer, Lyudmila Ivanovna. On her gravestone is a swastika, oriented in the direction of the sun, and again, a six-pointed star. Two symbols that today evoke diametrically opposite associations peacefully coexist on the grave of the 19th century. Guides hurry to explain. This is not the Star of David, but just a six-pointed star, a decorative element without religious significance. To which one could respond, then the harp is a menorah, and everyone sticks to their own opinion. Mikhail Petrovich Mussorgsky, another great Russian composer. On his gravestone is the same six-pointed star. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky is buried under a Catholic cross with two angels. The trio of great Russian composers, whose music has become a symbol of Russia, is buried under symbols that have no relation to orthodoxy. 19th century composers celebrated Holy Russia, which did not yet exist in their understanding. They created a musical image of a country whose history had been written only a few decades earlier. They worked on strengthening a new identity, a new legend, a new myth, and they were buried under symbols that indicated their true belonging. The Star of David is not exclusively a Jewish symbol. The six-pointed star appears in cultures across the world long before it became associated with Jewish tradition. It is found on ancient structures, on maps, on coats of arms. This symbol was used by a civilization that existed globally, before religious divisions. The elite of the 19th century knew that Russes was a renamed territory with a different history, that under the name Muscovy, later Russia, lies a space that was once called differently and belonged to another culture. The symbols on the graves are signs for the initiated, for those who understood the true history but could not speak about it openly. Dostoevsky and Zhukovsky are buried under Orthodox crosses. The 8-pointed crosses with a thorn crown, a symbol of martyrdom. What sufferings did these writers experience for the thorn crown to appear on their tombstones? They did not have physical sufferings that would justify this symbol. Perhaps it is about sufferings of another kind, about the necessity to write within the limits of what was allowed, hiding what they knew. Orthodox crosses in the cemetery are an exception, not a rule. And even these crosses contain elements that are rarely found on Russian graves. The crown of thorns is more characteristic of the Catholic tradition. Its depiction on the Orthodox cross indicates a mixing of traditions, a transitional period when the symbolism has not yet established itself. Dostoevsky and Zhukovsky were writers who worked to strengthen the official version of history. Their works formed the image of Russia as a great Orthodox power with ancient roots and a glorious past. Their graves demonstrate the correct symbolism for the people. They show how one should be buried to align with state ideology. But even here, there are non-standard elements. Even here, traces are visible that the system has not yet fully established itself. By the end of the 19th century, the process was completed. Orthodoxy established itself as the only acceptable form of religious expression. But at the beginning of the century, when Karamzin, Glinka, and Turchaninov were buried, the old symbolism was still used openly. Walk through the cemetery once more. Pay attention to the obelisks standing on stone spheres, like bedside tables on wheels. The surfaces of the obelisks are carved with dials, sundials with Roman numerals. On one of them is the figure of an angel standing on a cloud. In the angel's hands are a hammer and a chisel. The tools are pointed at the number 2. What is this? Decor? Or an encrypted date? Perhaps an indication of the time of the disaster. The beginning of the 19th century, 1802, 1820. The exact date is hidden, but a hint is left for those who are capable of deciphering. Sundials are not just decoration. They are an astronomical instrument used for precise calculations. A civilization that built identical buildings all over the world must have had ways to synchronize time. Sundials on gravestones are a memory of this system, of time that was measured not by mechanical devices, but by the movement of celestial bodies. Columns with bas-reliefs depicting incense burning. On the column, fire is blazing. Around the figures performing the ritual. The column is not a monument here. It is an altar, a functional object that was used for ceremonies. The energy structures of the old civilization could have looked exactly like this. Columns that gathered or distributed energy. Altars where fire served not for sacrifices in a religious sense, but for technological processes. Tombstones preserved the shape of these objects, but lost their function. They turned into decoration, a symbol, a reminder of what once was. Epitaphs also speak of a different understanding of life. At the Tikvin cemetery, there is an inscription. Passerby, with kind legs, I walked here among the graves, reading the inscriptions around, just as you read mine now. Do you understand this hint? At Lazarevskoye, passerby, you are walking, but you will lie down as I do. Sit down, rest on the stone with me. Pick a blade of grass and remember about fate. I am at home. You are a guest. Think about yourself. Life was understood as a temporary stay, and the grave as a permanent home. Not the end of the journey, but a return to where one came from. Leaving life did not frighten those who wrote these lines. It was a natural part of existence, an event just like birth or growing up. Pay attention to the fences around the graves. Many of them have been preserved since the time of the necropolis's foundation. Cast iron of the highest quality, patterns that cannot be reproduced by modern methods. And in these patterns, the swastika appears again, everywhere, aligned with the movement of the sun, in the direction of the celestial body's path across the sky. The swastika is today associated with events of the 20th century, but in the cemeteries of the 19th, it is constantly encountered. This is the oldest solar symbol, representing eternal movement, the circulation of energy, the connection between the earthly and the cosmic. The civilization that used this sign understood the laws that modern science is just beginning to uncover. Alexei Turchaninov lived 83 years. The inscription on the tablet, to which Kronos points, he departed from the whole world in the 83rd year of his life, on the 21st day of March in the year 1787. This is not an exception. Many in the cemetery lived to 70, 80 years. The elite lived for a long time, having access to knowledge and technology. Turchaninov owned factories in the Urals, a territory where traces of old technologies were preserved. Metallurgy, chemical processes, possibly medicine, the legacy of a lost civilization. By the 20th century, this knowledge had completely disappeared. The history of Russia is the history of the Church. The Church wrote chronicles, controlled education, created a version of the past. After the catastrophe of the 18th and 19th centuries, the Romanovs found ruins and decided to appropriate the legacy. The Church fulfilled the task. It created a history from Rurik, filled in the gaps with fictional events, declared as ancient traditions that were less than 100 years old. In cemeteries, the Church did not manage to rewrite the stones. Bas-reliefs with sacrifices were hidden in museums. Openly pagan symbolism was declared decor without meaning. Cemeteries remained witnesses of the time when the old system was still used openly, and the new legend was just being created. Old photographs show people standing next to giant tombstones. The proportions do not match. People appear disproportionately small against the backdrop of multi-ton sarcophagi and columns. The architectural gigantism of buildings is replicated in cemeteries. Sarcophagi made of solid marble, columns as thick as a human height. These sizes suggest that the creators were larger than modern humans. Walk through the Lavra to the communist cemetery, the 20th century, the era of atheism and the struggle against religion. Do you expect to see the hammer and sickle, red stars, slogans about a bright future? They are almost absent. Instead, there are the same architectural forms found in royal necropolises: shortened columns, massive obelisks, step pyramids resembling the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, granite mausoleums in the ancient style. The grave of the commissar, shot in 37, is marked by a broken column. The grave of the party worker is a pyramid without a top. The grave of the scholar who created Soviet weapons is a sarcophagus made of solid granite with rough inner walls. The revolution changed the power, but did not change the language of stone. The architectural code turned out to be indestructible. But why? Perhaps because those who created the tombstones worked not from blueprints, but from memory. The stonecutters saw old forms everywhere, in buried buildings, in foundations, in the remnants of structures whose purpose had been forgotten. These forms seemed correct and natural to them. They reproduced what they saw, without thinking about the symbolic meaning. It is interesting that the quality of stone processing in old cemeteries surpasses modern capabilities. The seams between the blocks of sarcophagi are so tight that a knife blade cannot fit into them. The polishing of marble achieves a mirror-like shine without the use of modern abrasives. The inscriptions are cut with perfect depth and evenness of lines, as if templates or mechanical tools were used, which official history remains silent about. Walk through the modern sections of the cemetery. Here they bury people who passed away in the 21st century. And what will you see? Polished granite stelae, marble columns, Even small pyramids are appearing on the graves of entrepreneurs and officials. The forms have not disappeared. They continue to reproduce, although few think about their origin. The system is not transmitted through books and instructions. It lives in the very material, in the traditions of the masters, in the concepts of what a deserving grave should look like. When a person comes to order a monument, they are shown catalogues. And in these catalogues are the same obelisks, the same columns, the same forms that stood here 200 years ago. The circle is closed. The cemetery is not a place of mourning. It is an archive in stone. Every skull with a butterfly, every star on the composer's grave, every broken column is a testament to the fact that they show us one Russia while they buried a completely different one. Karamzin wrote a history under the all-seeing eye, a symbol of those who see the hidden. Turchaninov was buried under bas-reliefs with Roman sacrifices, and these bas-reliefs were hidden. Glinka sang of Holy Russia and rests under the Star of David. The communists, who destroyed churches, repeated the symbolism of the Tsarist cemeteries. Alexander Nevsky Lavra stands in a place that Peter I chose for a reason. The official version speaks of the victory over the Swedes, of the significance of this point for the city. However, studying old maps shows that this was a junction even before the foundation of St. Petersburg. The intersection of waterways, elevation, special geometry of the terrain. Places of power are not chosen at random. They are found by recognizing the signs that were known to the previous civilization. Tartaria left not just buildings and tombstones. It left knowledge of where and how to build so that structures would last for centuries. Modern research confirms that old temples and monasteries were erected at points of geomagnetic anomalies. Coincidence? Or the legacy of a system that knew how to work with energies, the existence of which official science only learned about in the 20th century? Silent stones speak louder than any chronicles. You just need to learn to read them. Subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss new investigations. Many more mysteries and discoveries are ahead. We will continue to search for evidence, ask uncomfortable questions, and explore what official science overlooks. Because the truth is always nearby. You just need to want to see it.